For today's session, our main focus is to learn how the different structures of the circulatory and respiratory systems work together to transport oxygen-rich blood and nutrients to the different parts of the body, and also to understand the prevention, detection, and treatment of diseases affecting the respiratory and circulatory systems. Now, let's get started with the respiratory system. Respiratory system is made up of organs in the body that help us to breathe. The cells of the human body require a constant stream of oxygen to stay alive. The main function of the respiratory system is to provide oxygen to the body cells while removing carbon dioxide. It is also known as the human breathing system. The respiratory system will not function without the different organs that makes respiration possible. Let's check out the different parts of the respiratory system. There are three major parts of the respiratory system: the airway, the lungs, and muscle of respiration. The airway includes the nose, the nasal passages, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. Then the lungs, and lastly, the muscle of respiration, which is the diaphragm. The air we breathe enters the nose, then the nasal passages. The nasal passages are lined with cilia, mucous membrane, and blood capillaries. The air we breathe is filtered by cilia and then moistened by mucous membrane and warmed by blood capillaries. And then, the air will pass through the pharynx or the throat, and then the air will pass through the trachea or the windpipe, which separates into two branches called bronchial tubes or bronchi. The bronchi subdivide many times inside the lungs, becoming hair-like structures called the bronchioles. In the last terminal parts of the bronchioles are tiny bubble-like structures called alveoli or air sacs. These are the ones that allows gas exchange in the lungs. In the process called diffusion, the oxygen from the air moves from the alveoli to the capillaries. The carbon dioxide moves from the capillaries to the alveoli as we exhale. This process is called respiration. As being said that the main function of the respiratory system is respiration or breathing, let us check out how this process is made possible by inhalation and exhalation. Inhalation and exhalation is a continuous process. During the inhalation process, the air molecules are crowded outside and tend to get into the lungs where there are fewer air molecules. And during exhalation, the air tend to move outside because they are too crowded inside the lungs. Take a look on this clip. You will observe that when you breathe in or inhale, the diaphragm muscle contracts. Inhaling moves the diaphragm down and expands the chest cavity. Simultaneously, the rib moves up and increase the size of the chest cavity. There is now more space and less air pressure inside the lungs. Air pushes in from the outside where there is higher air pressure. It pushes into the lungs where there is lower air pressure, and when you breathe out or exhale, the diaphragm muscle relaxes. The diaphragm and ribs return to their original place. The chest cavity returns to its original size. There is now less space and greater air pressure inside the lungs. It pushes the air outside where there is lower air pressure. The key concept for this is that when you inhale, your respiratory system gets oxygen, and when you exhale, carbon dioxide is released. Before we end the discussion about the respiratory system, let me give you some trivia. Did you know that breathing rate depends on activity level? That when you sleep, breathing slows down, and when you exercise, breathing speeds up. How is this possible? It is because during strenuous activity or strenuous exercise, much carbon dioxide is released. This increase of carbon dioxide in the blood causes the breathing center to send impulses to increase the breathing rate. Aside from the respiratory system, the circulatory system is also responsible in transporting oxygen and nutrients throughout the body. Now, let's talk more about the circulatory system. The circulatory system. The circulatory system is the life support structure that nourishes your cells with nutrients from the food you eat and oxygen from the air you breathe. It can be compared to a complex arrangement of highways, avenues, and lanes connecting all the cells together into a neighborhood. The community of cells sustains the body to stay alive. The other name for the circulatory system is the cardiovascular system. Why? It is simply because it is consists of the heart and a closed system of blood vessels. It is also known as the transport system because the circulatory system functions with other body systems to deliver different materials into the body. It circulates vital elements such as oxygen and nutrients. At the same time, it also transports waste away from the body. Here are the three main components of the circulatory system. First is the blood, next is the heart, and lastly, the blood vessels. Let's start with the blood. Blood is the one that carries materials like oxygen and nutrients throughout the body. Next is the heart. Heart is the one that pumps the blood throughout the body. And lastly, blood vessels. Blood vessels are the one that carries the blood throughout the body. There are actually three types of blood vessels. First are the veins that carry the oxygenated blood through the heart. Next are the arteries. Arteries are the ones that carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. And lastly, the capillaries. Capillaries are the actual site where gases, nutrients are exchanged. The human heart. The heart is a hollow muscular organ about the size of your fist, which is located in the center of your chest between the lungs. The heart has two pumps. Each pump has two chambers, the upper and lower chambers. The upper chamber is the atrium that receives blood coming in from the veins. And the lower chamber is the ventricle that forces the blood out into the arteries. There is a valve between each atrium and ventricle to prevent the blood from flowing backwards. The valves are like one-way doors that keep the blood moving in only one direction. Valves control movement of blood into the heart chambers and out of the aorta. All of the muscle tissues of the heart do not contract at the same time. Different parts of the heart contract at different times. When the top portion contracts, the bottom part relaxes. When the bottom contracts, the top relaxes. When a chamber contracts, it becomes smaller and the blood inside gets squeezed and pumped out. The movement of blood through the blood vessels to distribute nutrients and oxygen and remove waste products from all parts of the body is called circulation. There are three types of circulation: systemic circulation, the coronary circulation, and the pulmonary circulation. The coronary circulation refers to the movement of the blood through the tissues of the heart. Next, systemic circulation. The systemic circulation refers to the movement of the blood from the heart to the rest of the body, excluding the lungs. Last, the pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation refers to the movement of the blood from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart again. Let us discuss the process of pulmonary and systemic circulations. The cardiovascular system is divided into systemic and pulmonary parts. The systemic circulation carries the blood from the heart to the tissues of the body and then returns it to the heart. Oxygen-rich blood is pumped from the left ventricle into the ascending aorta. The aorta then makes an inverted U-turn to form the aortic arch, which give rise to branches that supply the head, neck, and upper limbs. The aorta continues posterior to the heart as the descending aorta, which travels to the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. It supplies the organs of these cavities and the lower limb. In the systemic capillaries, oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide, resulting in oxygen-poor blood. The oxygen-poor blood enters the right atrium via superior and inferior vena cava. The pulmonary circulation carries blood from the heart to the lungs for gas exchange and then returns it to the heart. Oxygen-poor blood is pumped from the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk. The large pulmonary trunk divides into the right and left pulmonary arteries. These arteries transport blood to the right and left lungs. In the pulmonary capillaries, carbon dioxide is exchanged for oxygen. This results in oxygen-rich blood that then flows through the 4 pulmonary veins and enters the left atrium. We already learned the functions and the different parts that make up the respiratory and circulatory system. Now let us know how the respiratory and circulatory systems work together. Let us watch the video presentation.
The circulatory system's ability to deliver oxygen throughout the body depends on the proper functioning of the respiratory system. The interactions between the circulatory and respiratory systems are best demonstrated by following the path of the red blood cells starting in the heart and traveling through the lungs. A red blood cell that has just returned from delivering oxygen and that has brought back carbon dioxide would be in the right upper chamber of the heart or in the right atrium. When the atrium contracts, the cell is pumped in the right lower chamber of the heart or the right ventricle. When the ventricle contracts, the red blood cell is pumped out of the heart through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. Through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, the red blood cell enters tiny blood vessels that come into close contact with the wall of the alveoli. In the alveoli, gas exchange will be possible. Then, the red blood cell returns to the heart via the pulmonary vein. From the pulmonary vein, the red blood cell enters the left atrium of the heart and then the left ventricle. The red blood cell is pumped out of the left ventricle via the aorta and eventually it will reach the capillaries, leading to the individual cells. There, the cell absorbs the oxygen from the red blood cell and passes on their waste material, which is the carbon dioxide. The red blood cell returns to the right atrium of the heart and the process will start again.
Here's some additional information of how the respiratory and circulatory systems work together to transport nutrients, gases, and other molecules to different parts of the body. Glucose is the simplest soluble form of nutrients from food. Most combine with oxygen to yield energy, carbon dioxide, and water through respiration. The nutrients and gases must then be transported by the circulatory system throughout the body to perform its overall metabolic processes. Each time that our heart beats, it delivers oxygen-rich blood to our body. This allows our body to function properly. Our heart rate or pulse is the number of times our heart beats in a minute. When we are resting, our heart rate slows down because our body does not need as much blood as it does when we exercise. During exercise, our heart typically beats faster so that more blood gets into our body. Now, we know that strenuous activities may lead to an increased heart rate. So it is better that we monitor our activities to avoid dangers of cardiorespiratory diseases. Another risk factor that drastically increases heart rate and decreases the amount of oxygen in the blood is smoking cigarettes. Cigarette smoking harms nearly every organ in our body. This causes many illnesses and affects our health in general. Now let's familiarize ourselves with the negative effects or diseases of the circulatory system and respiratory systems that is caused by smoking. Here are some of the diseases of the circulatory system caused by smoking. First is increased heart rate and blood pressure. Next is vascular disease. Vascular disease is the most common precursor of coronary heart disease. Coronary heart disease is the most common type of heart disease, and it happens when the arteries that supply blood to the heart becomes narrow. And last, arteriosclerosis. Arteriosclerosis occurs when the blood vessels that carry oxygen and nutrients from our heart to the rest of our body become stiff and thick. Now, here are some of the respiratory systems diseases that is caused by smoking. First is chronic bronchitis. This is due to the inflammation and irritation of bronchial tubes. Then, emphysema. Although emphysema can be genetic, smoking is the most common cause of emphysema. Then, asthma, cough, and colds, and then tuberculosis and lung cancer. These are some of the diseases caused by smoking to the circulatory and respiratory system. The leading causes of death around the world are diseases affecting the respiratory and circulatory systems. However, they can be prevented simply by having a lifestyle that promotes wellness. Circulatory and respiratory diseases begin to develop with unhealthy living. So symptoms of these illnesses must not be neglected and appropriate cure must be given immediately. Here are some tips on how we can take care of our respiratory system. 8 steps for a healthy respiratory system. Step 1. Increase your walking speed. How fast or how slowly you normally walk may predict how long you live. Walking also helps to exercise our lungs. Step 2. Maintain a healthy weight. Excess weight puts more stress on our lungs and compresses all respiratory muscles, making them work harder and less efficient. Step 3. We have to stay hydrated. Drinking plenty of water every day helps maintain a healthy weight and gives a thin consistency to the mucus lining of our airways and lungs. Step 4. Do not smoke. Smoking damages lungs and respiratory health by inducing inflammation. It is important to quit smoking and avoid having smoker lungs as you age. Step 5. We have to protect ourselves against pollution. Wearing a face mask will act as a protective barrier to our respiratory system on those days when pollution is high. And we have to monitor pollution levels to our place. Step 6. We have to reduce alcohol intake. Alcohol dehydrates our body and its consumption weakens the immune system, and it is making us prone to respiratory disease. Step 7. Learn yoga breathing techniques. This not only helps our lungs function better, but it can also bring on a sense of calm. This can be quite renewing and is excellent exercise for our lungs. Step 8. Don't be stressed and just be happy. So always remember, love our respiratory system. Thank you so much, fellow teachers, for attending the first session of this webinar. If you have any questions, you can find me and contact me on my Facebook and Messenger account. Just search Eliza Marie Tinadaro Villarta, or you can send me an email through my work email, elizamarie.villarta@deped.gov.ph. Here are some helpful resources that I use for this presentation. You can check out the sites and the books to check out more information about the content of this presentation.